So, welcome to this month's Evidence of Greatness. And I thought maybe we would do a little bit different article than we've done in the past. This one is not really an empirical study where it looks at numbers or those kinds of things, but instead it's kind of more of a theoretical paper that pulls together some of the theoretical research. And so this month we are going to talk about an article entitled Hope, Research and Theory in Relation to Solution-Focused Practice and Training. And this paper was written by Robert Blundo, Kristin Bolton, and Christopher Hall. And I figured that it was kind of important for us to talk about hope because this is a really not just for solution focus, but for psychotherapy as a whole, this is one of the principles or concepts that has been attributed to producing change over and over and over again. And so I think it's really important for us as clinicians and for us as researchers to be thinking about how do we engender hope in the work that we do, and how do we harness hope that's present in order to help our clients to create change. So I just want to start by considering why should we even be thinking about hope? And all of the things here are cited in this article that we're covering. So everything in this PowerPoint is also included in the article. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is that basically these authors have articulated that it's the overall attitude of hopefulness that's expressed in solution-focused brief therapy. And they kind of summarize this attitude as one of positivity, of respectfulness, and obviously of hopefulness, right? And so they kind of advocate that this is kind of the underlying premise of solution-focused brief therapy. They also cite what I kind of mentioned at the beginning, which is that hope is one of the common factors that's responsible for therapeutic change. And they cite Hubble, Duncan, Miller, and Wampold here. I probably just need to back up for just a second and say the common factors, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, the common factors come from literature and research that's been done that looks across modalities of therapy of what produces positive therapeutic outcomes. And regardless of what approach, right? So it may be psychodynamic, it may be CBT, it may be solution focused. And they look across each of those domains and they say, based on the research, what are the factors that contribute to change? And then they look at which factors across all of those models are the same or consistent. And one of the major findings that they find across multiple studies is that hope, regardless of what modality you're using, is one of the factors that is responsible for a significant amount of change within psychotherapy, which basically means that we as solution-focused brief therapists, we should have a really clear understanding of what do we do that inspires or generates hope, or harnesses the hope that the client brings. So we should be able to articulate that, but we should also then do work consistently in ways that will help to grow hope. And so then the last point down here is that solution-focused brief therapy is inherently applicable to increasing hope. And this comes from an article by Michael, Taylor, and Chavins. And one of the things that I think is really important about this is that this is more of a qualitative study where they were looking at the theoretical base, and they said what solution-focused brief therapists do is really in line with what we know about what creates hope, right? It increases hope. And so we inherently have a leg up or an advantage because based on what's already built into the way that we work, there are things that are consistent with growing hope or increasing hope. So this is something really, really important, this idea of hope. So then I want to just highlight some of the things that Blundo and Bolton and Hall mentioned about what exists in the literature and what does the research say about hope, right? So often they said that one of the things that was interesting is that oftentimes when people talk about or write about hope, they have made it in some sense synonymous to optimism or a future mindedness or the positive emotion of happiness, right? So if you think about this, if you think about people being optimistic, that means that they're optimistic about things might get better or things might change, right? And you can hear this, the synonym of hope in there. In addition, a future mindedness, right? Looking forward to the future and being hopeful about the future. Again, you can hear in solution focused brief therapy things like the preferred future and how looking toward the future engenders hope. And then they've also linked it to positive emotion, such as happiness, right? When I feel positive emotion, there's actually, and we'll come back to this again, but kind of a reciprocal relationship between positive emotion and hopefulness. When I feel positive, I also have an increase of hope. When I feel negative emotions, then I have a decrease in hope. So they tend to correlate with one another. They also mention kind of in this literature review that Magaletta and Oliver, they posit that there are two kind of components that are essential to hope. And it's an interesting conceptualization that I hadn't heard before, but there's a will component and there's a way component. And obviously in my head, that kind of struck up that common phrase that we hear, where there's a will, there's a way. And they equated a will to a strength of conviction, right? When I have a conviction that I want something or that something is possible, then I believe it, and then that belief engenders an opportunity for me to move toward that. Where a way is equated to a path that's followed to obtaining that desired outcome, right? So it's kind of like I have a desire to do it, and I can see that there is a pathway to achieving my desired outcome, and kind of catching the vision of both of those and having both of those be possible is kind of the recipe for hope, according to this study. In addition, they cited Frank and Frank, and Frank say hope generates feelings of optimism, energy, well-being, and may actually promote healing. And this study actually comes from the medical arena, where when people are hopeful about a prognosis or about the ability to get better or heal, they have found repeatedly in medical research that it actually does promote healing, that people tend to heal quicker, tend to heal more completely. And they draw kind of a parallel that if that can happen physically, that should probably also be able to happen mentally and emotionally. So where our arena is working kind of in that mental and emotional realm, having hope that things could change or improve actually does show up in literature, that it does enhance healing, that people do get better. And I think that's such a powerful thing for us to know and understand, that if we can have conversations that get our clients to articulate reasons that they might be hopeful, just that conversation alone may have a healing component to it. So I think that's a really powerful finding. In addition, they cite Cutcliffe, and Cutcliffe says, research indicates that hope is an expression of a person or a client, and not a result of an explicit expectation or a request of the clinician. Hope is not offered, it's not demanded or injected into the work. Instead, it forms within building of a relationship that's based on the clinician's ability to recognize human strengths and possibilities. And I think this is so fundamental to what we do. And I think oftentimes it's really a misunderstood concept. Oftentimes when we're teaching and we are talking about hope, I've heard clinicians say, I say things to my clients like, I'll hold your hope until you're in a place where you can hold your hope. Or I'm just trying to engender hope, or I'm just trying, I give my client hope. right? And I think from the research, one of the things that's really, really important, and we're going to kind of transition into Snyder's hope theory, is that hope isn't something that we can transmit to our clients. It's not something that we can give them. It's not something that we can ask them to develop or grow. It's not something that we can infuse into our session, but instead it's something that is internal to our clients. And Snyder, which I'll transition to in just a second, says hope is a state, right? That you can't be void of hope. You can have less hope or you can have more hope, but you can't have zero hope, right? And that idea of every client has hope. And it's our job to have conversations where they can utilize that hope, or that hope can grow. But it isn't something that we can give them. I think that's such a fundamental piece to this idea of hope. And I think what that does is it requires us as clinicians to really put trust in our clients and to say, you have to have hope. So I will engage with you. I will talk with you. I will speak to you as if you are a person who has hope. And just by engaging with that person as a person who has hope, then we understand that positive emotion increases and therefore hope increases, right? So really our job as far as engendering hope or growing hope within this work is twofold. One, engaging in a really meaningful connection with our clients, and then beginning to talk to them as if they are a person who already has hope, because that's kind of the theory here. And hope, and Snyder's hope theory says there are kind of three components. And you'll hear a similar thing going back to Magalata and Oliver, but they have three components. Snyder has three components. One is hope-filled thoughts, right? And he even uses the word goal, but I would say that the way that he uses goal isn't usually, it's not synonymous to the way that it's typical for goals to be used, especially in a therapeutic relationship, where it's like, I want to achieve this thing. But instead, he talks about it as thoughts that are hope-filled, right? Things that I can hold on to, that I can place out there as hope-filled thoughts. And then he talks about how there must also be agency, right? And the way that he talked about this is that agency thinking is motivation to find within oneself the means or the way to move toward those hope thoughts, right? So in some way, this might look like problem solving, or this might look like solution building, but in some sense, what we're really doing is having a conversation with people, and as they articulate why they want their desired outcome, or what difference that desired outcome would make for them, that's engaging that agency thinking. It's helping them to realize that they have control, that they have possibilities of being able to move toward those hopeful thoughts. And the third concept that comes from Snyder's hope theory is pathway thinking. And this is creating alternative pathways to reaching that particular goal, or again, reaching that desired outcome. And what this means, this creating alternative pathways, is that oftentimes when people come in, they think that there's one pathway to get there, right? You might hear people say, I just need my kid to behave differently or better, and then we would be a happy family. But this alternative pathways means if I'm aiming for happy family, perhaps there's other alternative pathways to getting there. And when I'm motivated, when I'm utilizing that agency thinking, then I may be able to come up with different pathways and multiple pathways, and an understanding of how to pursue those various pathways. So what it does is it really opens up possibilities, which you think about solution-focused brief therapy, and that being such a consistent piece of when hope is present, possibilities emerge. And I think that's so valuable for us to remember, is that as we ask our questions, at presupposing that people are motivated, that they have agency, that they are able to have agency thinking, to talk to them about the presence of their desired outcome and possible pathways of achieving that desired outcome. There's such power in just having this kind of a conversation that really increases hope. So then I want to just highlight too this idea of how hope is connected to change, right? And what the authors of this study kind of emphasize is that hope is a part of the change process. That when a client links hope to the process of change and to their desired outcome, the possibility of successfully achieving those outcomes actually increases. And you can see that they cited Wilkins here back in the 70s and 80s. So this is something that we've known for quite a while, is that when hope is connected to the desired outcome and thinking change could happen, then people are actually able to move toward that desired outcome quite readily. The authors also highlight from a study by McKeel, and McKeel did process outcome research where he kind of looked at multiple studies that have been done on what's the process of solution-focused brief therapy? How does it work? And McKeel listed several different research outcomes that pointed to the fact that solution-focused brief therapy enhances hope. And also it enhances expectations for accomplishing our desired outcomes. And he cited many different theories that where clients had said, when I went through this solution-focused process, I had more hope. And I not only had more hope, but I also felt like what I articulated as my desired outcome, that was actually an achievable outcome. Right? And you can hear in that research where people said, I had more hope and I felt like my desired outcome was reasonable. You can hear the consistency between Snyder's hope theory, where people had that motivation, the hope increased, right? So their agency thinking increased, and they felt like the desired outcome was more achievable. So the pathway thinking also increased. So you can see just by going through this solution-focused process, where hope was an emphasis, that pathway thinking increased, agency thinking increased, which then increased hope, right? So it's such a powerful finding that we do things that are inherent to increasing hope. And then the last thing I wanted to mention here about this idea of change came from Bozeman, and he reported that clients in solution-focused treatment expressed significantly higher expectations of realizing their desired outcomes than other medical model-based approaches or pathology approaches or problem-focused approaches, right? So you think about the difference between focusing on desired outcome versus thinking about and focusing on problems. Bozeman reported that the clients who had this comparison, they said the solution-focused people expressed, I'm much more optimistic about being able to achieve my desired outcomes. In essence, my hope has grown. Whereas people who went through problem-focused approaches did not have that same increase in hope. So all of this research boils down to when we do solution-focused brief therapy and we do it really well, increased hope is a very natural byproduct. And so then the last slide that I want to talk about, and again, this article isn't necessarily an empirical article, but it does draw on a lot of empirical articles to make an argument for hope. And they articulate that when we have the when things are better perspective, so when we ask our clients about when things are better, what would you notice or what would be different, right? This kind of perspective acts as a catalyst that increases hope, right? It develops a sense of hopefulness. So just that idea of when things get better serves to increase hope. Also, when we start our sessions with what are your best hopes, that sets the stage for an entire session that's anchored on this idea of your hope. And we should have as an emphasis the idea of holding on to their desired outcome as it relates to hope. So I think that's hugely important. And the last thing that they mentioned, which I thought was really important, is that very rarely is hope discussed in an overt way in solution-focused books, in solution-focused trainings, despite the fact that, again, this is a factor that's very, very significant to producing change. They looked through several books and in essence found very few of them included an overt acknowledgement of the value and importance of hope in this work. And there was kind of a call to action to say, we need to talk about hope. We need to integrate it within solution-focused brief therapy. We need to talk about how hope is actually a mechanism for change in what we do as solution-focused brief therapists. So then they listed, you can see here on the right side of this slide, the things that we as solution-focused brief therapists do that enhance hope, right? It's things like listening really well and acknowledging what's going on for our clients, focusing on aspects of who they are that are already consistent with their desired outcomes, asking questions about change and assuming that change will happen. So again, all of the things that we do as solution-focused brief therapists can be connected and tied to hope. So that's the end of the article. I hope that you'll take a look at it. I will include the reference as well for this article. But I hope you'll look at it, and I hope you'll kind of give yourself permission to think about how do you infuse hope into the work that you do? How do you engage with your clients in hopeful ways? Knowing that this is a huge component of what can create change for clients. So I hope that was helpful for you. It was a little bit of a different approach to the evidence of greatness, but I think hope is such a fundamental principle of greatness that we have to understand and harness the power of hope. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you about your thoughts and questions. As always, if you have articles that you would like to be included as part of this Evidence of Greatness series, feel free to send them to me and I'll work through them. But thanks very much, and we'll talk to you next month.